For 4 untouched years, her cold millionaire husband ignored her, until he finally reached for her. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the main character. Sophie sat in her luxurious penthouse, the silence of the night broken only by the ticking of the clock. Her husband Ethan, the cold, distant millionaire, hadn't spoken to her in days. For 4 years, their marriage had been a contract, nothing more, nothing less. She wasn't even sure if he ever truly cared about her. When they first married, it was clear. He wanted her to be his perfect wife in public, someone to maintain his image. But behind closed doors, he hardly acknowledged her existence. At first, Sophie thought it was just the nature of their arrangement, a business deal, not love. But as the years went by, her loneliness grew, and the walls of the grand house seemed to close in around her. She longed for something more, something real. She had tried to reach out to him, to make their marriage work, but every attempt was met with cold indifference. She felt invisible in her own home. Her dreams of a happy family, of true love, seemed so far away now. Sophie had resigned herself to the life she had, knowing that there was no way out. But that all changed one evening, as she was sitting by the window, staring out at the city lights below. Ethan had just come home from another late night at the office. The door to his study slammed shut, and Sophie couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. She wasn't sure why it still hurt after all these years, but it did. She heard footsteps approaching her, and before she knew it, Ethan was standing beside her, his face soft with a look she hadn't seen in years. "Sophie," he said, his voice unexpectedly gentle. "I need to talk to you." She turned to face him, her heart pounding. Could this be the moment? The moment he would finally open up? Or would this just be another cold interaction, another reminder of their empty marriage? But as Ethan reached for her hand, Sophie realized that maybe, just maybe, things were about to change. Ethan's touch, though hesitant, sent a rush of emotions through Sophie. It had been so long since he had touched her like that, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he was finally reaching for her. She looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of the man she once hoped to marry. He gave her a small, uncertain smile. "I'm sorry, Sophie," he said. "I've been distant, but I want to try. I want to fix this." Her breath caught in her throat. Could it be true? Was the cold, unreachable millionaire finally seeing her? Sophie wasn't sure, but for the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope. She squeezed his hand gently. Maybe they could still find their way back to each other. And just like that, everything changed. As the days passed, Sophie found herself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. Ethan's sudden change in behavior left her both hopeful and cautious. She had spent years in the shadows of his indifference, and now, here he was, reaching out, showing vulnerability for the first time since their marriage. But was it real? Or was this just another fleeting moment of kindness that would soon fade away? Sophie couldn't afford to get her hopes up. She had seen this before: the empty promises, the coldness that followed. But this time, something felt different. Something had shifted. Ethan's words echoed in her mind. "I want to try. I want to fix this." She wasn't sure how to respond. After all, how could she trust him after everything that had happened? It had been 4 long years of silence, 4 years of feeling like a stranger in her own marriage. She needed time to think, to process everything. So, she decided to focus on herself for once. Sophie threw herself into her work, spending her days at the art gallery she had recently opened, a dream she had held onto for years. She had always loved art, but it was only after marrying Ethan that she had the chance to pursue it seriously. The gallery was her sanctuary, a place where she could escape the pressures of her marriage and find a sense of purpose. Despite the success of her gallery, Sophie couldn't shake the feeling of loneliness that lingered in her heart. She missed the companionship she once dreamed of with Ethan. She longed for the connection that had been lost in the cold distance between them. But as the days went by, she realized that she couldn't wait forever. She couldn't keep living her life, hoping for something that might never come. One evening, as she was closing the gallery, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Ethan. "Sophie, can we talk? I've been thinking about us, and I want to explain everything." Sophie stared at the message for a moment, her heart racing. She had been waiting for this moment, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure if she was ready. She had spent so many years in this marriage, holding on to hope that things would get better, only to be disappointed time and time again. But something in Ethan's message told her that this time might be different. With a deep breath, Sophie replied, "I'll meet you at the house in an hour." The drive home was quiet, and Sophie couldn't help but feel the weight of the decision she was about to make. As she pulled into the driveway, she saw Ethan's car parked in the driveway, his figure standing by the front door. He looked different, more vulnerable, more human. He had always been a powerful, stoic figure, but tonight he seemed uncertain, even nervous. Sophie stepped out of the car and walked toward him, her heart pounding in her chest. Ethan turned to face her, his expression softening as their eyes met. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was thick with unspoken words. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "Sophie, I know I've hurt you," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "I've been a fool. I've let my work, my pride, and my fears get in the way of what we could have had. But I'm not that man anymore. I want to make it right." Sophie's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to believe him, but the years of emotional neglect weighed heavily on her. How could she trust that this time would be different? "Ethan, you can't just erase the past," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "You can't expect me to forget how you treated me. I've been invisible to you for so long. It's hard to just let that go." Ethan reached out, taking her hands in his. "I know," he whispered. "I don't expect you to forgive me overnight. But I'm asking for a chance, just a chance to prove that I can be the man you deserve. The man I should have been from the start." Sophie looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of insincerity. But all she saw was vulnerability and sincerity. For the first time in years, she saw the man she had once married, the man she had fallen in love with. Slowly, she nodded. "Okay," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll give you a chance. But you have to understand, it's going to take time. I can't just forget everything, Ethan. I need to see that you really mean this." Ethan's face softened, and he pulled her into a gentle embrace. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice filled with relief. "I won't let you down, Sophie. I promise." As they stood there, holding each other in the quiet of the night, Sophie realized that this was the beginning of something new. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope. A hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. And with that hope, Sophie knew that anything was possible. As the weeks went by, Sophie and Ethan slowly began to rebuild the fragile foundation of their relationship. Every day felt like a step toward something new, but also a reminder of how far they had drifted apart. Sophie was still hesitant, still unsure whether she could fully trust Ethan again. The years of emotional neglect hadn't simply disappeared. But as they spent more time together, she started to see glimpses of the man she had once loved, the man she had believed in. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Ethan spoke softly, his voice filled with sincerity. "Sophie, I know it's going to take time, but I want to show you every day that I'm here, that I'm committed to making things right." Sophie looked at him, the warmth in his eyes almost overwhelming. It had been so long since she had seen that look, the vulnerability, the honesty. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that he was genuine, that he truly wanted to change. They spent their days reconnecting, slowly rebuilding their bond. Sophie started to open up more, sharing her dreams, her fears, her desires, things she had kept to herself for so long. Ethan listened, really listened, and responded with compassion, not the cold detachment she had grown used to. One night, as they sat on the balcony watching the city lights twinkle below, Sophie spoke up. "I've always wanted to open a studio, a place where I can teach art and share my passion with others." Ethan turned to her, his expression softening. "Why haven't you done it yet?" Sophie sighed, her fingers tracing the edge of her glass. "I didn't think I could. I've always been too afraid, too unsure of myself. And then, with everything going on between us, I just put it on hold." Ethan reached out, taking her hand gently in his. "You should do it, Sophie. You have an incredible talent, and you deserve to chase your dreams." His words hit her harder than she expected. She had always doubted herself, always felt like her dreams were too big, too far out of reach. But here was Ethan, the man who had once been emotionally distant, encouraging her to go after what she had always wanted. Sophie felt a rush of emotions, gratitude, hope, fear, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe she could actually do it. Maybe she could finally stop hiding behind the walls she had built for herself. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. With Ethan's encouragement, Sophie started to make plans for her art studio. She began researching spaces, meeting with potential clients, and designing the layout. It was scary, it was overwhelming, but it was also exhilarating. Ethan was there every step of the way, supporting her, helping her with the details, offering advice when needed. Slowly, the dream she had tucked away for so long started to take shape. But even as they worked together, there was a lingering fear inside Sophie. Could she really trust that this time was different? Could she trust that Ethan had truly changed? One evening, as they were celebrating the opening of the studio, Sophie pulled Ethan aside, her heart racing. "Ethan, I have to know," she said, her voice trembling. "Are you doing this because you truly want to make things right with me? Or is this just another way for you to feel better about yourself?" Ethan's expression softened, and he gently cupped her face in his hands. "Sophie, I've been a fool. I've spent so many years building walls around myself, convincing myself that I didn't need anyone. But the truth is, I need you. I want you. I've always wanted you. And I want to make up for the years I've lost with you." Sophie felt a tear slip down her cheek, a tear she hadn't even realized was there. She had spent so much time wondering if Ethan truly cared, if he had ever truly loved her. And now, standing in front of him, she realized that maybe he had been lost, just like her. But now, they had both found their way back. Sophie smiled, a small, tentative smile. "I believe you," she whispered. Ethan kissed her forehead gently, his arms wrapping around her in a warm embrace. "Thank you, Sophie. I promise, I won't let you down again." As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, Sophie realized that this was the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where they would face their fears, their past, and their future together. It wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time in a long time, Sophie felt like they were on the right path. And maybe, just maybe, their love story could still have a happy ending. As the months passed, Sophie and Ethan continued to navigate the delicate path of rebuilding their relationship. The art studio was finally open, and Sophie had poured her heart into it, just as she had always dreamed. Ethan, true to his word, supported her every step of the way, even going so far as to attend art events with her, though he was still a man of few words. But the small gestures, the quiet encouragement, spoke volumes. Sophie had always believed that actions spoke louder than words, and Ethan's actions had slowly begun to melt the walls she had built around her heart. They were far from perfect. There were still moments of uncertainty, moments when Sophie questioned whether she was truly ready to let go of the past. But every day, Ethan proved that he was trying, and that was all she could ask for. One evening, as they sat at the kitchen table, going over plans for the next art exhibition, Sophie looked at him, her mind racing. "Ethan," she said softly, "do you ever wonder if this is all too late? I mean, all the time we've lost. I don't know if I can just forget it." Ethan looked at her, his expression serious but filled with warmth. "I don't expect you to forget," he said gently. "What I want is for us to move forward, to create something new, something better. I can't change the past, Sophie, but I'm willing to spend the rest of my life making it up to you." Sophie's heart skipped a beat at his words. She had spent so long holding on to the hurt, holding on to the past, that she hadn't allowed herself to truly embrace the future. She wasn't sure if she was ready to fully forgive him. But in that moment, she realized that maybe forgiveness wasn't about erasing the past, it was about choosing to move forward, despite it. The next few weeks were a blur of art exhibitions, business meetings, and quiet moments spent together. Ethan continued to make small changes, showing Sophie that he was there for her, that he wanted to be the man she deserved. They had dinner together most nights, sometimes talking about their day, sometimes sitting in comfortable silence. It was these small, intimate moments that began to stitch their relationship back together. But there were still obstacles they had to face. One evening, as they attended a charity event for the art community, Sophie couldn't help but feel a wave of anxiety wash over her. She had never felt comfortable in these high society settings, always feeling out of place among the well-dressed, polished guests. Ethan, as always, looked calm and composed, his status as a successful businessman apparent in every step he took. Sophie felt the pressure, but Ethan noticed her discomfort. As they stood by the refreshment table, he turned to her, his voice low. "Sophie, you don't have to prove anything here. You're just as important as anyone else in this room. You're not just my wife. You're a talented artist, and you belong here just as much as anyone." Sophie smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. His words touched her deeply, and in that moment, she felt a sense of belonging that she had never experienced before. She had spent so long feeling like an outsider in her own life, but now, with Ethan by her side, she was beginning to see herself differently. After the event, as they walked back to their car, Sophie reached for Ethan's hand. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Ethan squeezed her hand, his gaze soft. "You don't have to thank me," he replied. "I'm just doing what I should have done all along." As they drove home, Sophie reflected on everything they had been through: the pain, the distance, the heartache, but also the healing, the growth, and the new beginning they had created together. It hadn't been easy, and there were still challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long time, Sophie felt hopeful about the future. She no longer saw herself as the woman who had been ignored, the woman who had spent years waiting for something that might never come. She was Sophie, an artist, a wife, and, most importantly, someone who was beginning to believe in the possibility of love again. When they arrived home, Ethan pulled into the driveway, and they both sat in the car for a moment, just listening to the quiet of the night. Then, Ethan turned to her, his eyes soft but full of determination. "Sophie, I know we've had our struggles, and I know I can't undo the past, but I want to be with you, not just as a husband, but as your partner in every sense of the word. I want to build a future with you, a future that's full of love, trust, and everything we've both dreamed of." Sophie's heart swelled with emotion. It was a simple promise, but it was everything she had ever wanted. She leaned in, resting her head on his shoulder, and for the first time in years, she felt at peace. Maybe, just maybe, their love story was only just beginning. As the months passed, Sophie and Ethan found themselves settling into a new rhythm. Their relationship, once fractured and cold, now felt warmer, more comfortable. They had their ups and downs, of course, but with every passing day, they grew stronger together. Ethan's actions spoke louder than any words could, and Sophie found herself starting to trust him again. One evening, as they sat together in their living room, Sophie couldn't help but notice how much had changed. The tension that had once filled the air between them had all but disappeared, replaced by something deeper, something real. Ethan was no longer the distant millionaire who had ignored her. He was now her partner, her equal. She had seen him work tirelessly to rebuild their bond, and now she felt ready to take the next step in their journey. "Ethan," she began, her voice soft but steady, "I've been thinking, we've come so far, and I want to be sure that we're both ready for what comes next." Ethan looked at her, his expression full of understanding. He had always known that rebuilding their relationship would take time, but he was committed to it every step of the way. "What do you mean?" he asked, his tone gentle. Sophie took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "I mean, I want to make sure that we're both on the same page. We've been through so much, and I don't want to rush into anything, but I do want to move forward with you. I just need to know that you're as committed to this as I am." Ethan nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "Sophie, I've never been more committed to anything in my life. I know I've made mistakes, but I promise you, I am here for the long haul. I want this. I want us. I want to build a life with you." Sophie smiled, a small but genuine smile, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. Ethan was right. He had shown her with his actions that he was in this for the long run, and that meant everything to her. The following weeks were filled with more moments of connection, more quiet evenings spent together, talking about their dreams and plans for the future. Sophie began to feel like she was truly seeing Ethan for who he was, not just the powerful businessman he portrayed to the world, but the man who had spent so long hiding his true feelings. And Ethan, for his part, was more open than he had ever been before. He shared his fears, his regrets, and his hopes for their future, and Sophie listened with an open heart. One night, as they sat on the balcony, watching the city lights twinkle below, Sophie turned to Ethan, her heart full of emotion. "Ethan, I've realized something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been so afraid to love again, to let myself feel something real. But with you, I feel safe. I feel like I can finally be myself, without any walls between us." Ethan reached out, taking her hand in his touch warm and reassuring. "Sophie, I feel the same way. I know we've had our challenges, but I believe in us. I believe in what we're building together." Sophie smiled, her eyes sparkling with unshed tears. "I do too," she said softly. "I believe in us." The next day, as they walked through the art gallery together, Sophie found herself thinking about how far they had come. She had once felt so alone in their marriage, trapped in a relationship that felt more like a business deal than a partnership. But now, she felt like they were truly partners in every sense of the word. Ethan had shown her that love wasn't just about grand gestures or promises, it was about the little things, the everyday actions that proved how much you cared. As they stood in front of a painting she had recently finished, Sophie turned to Ethan, her heart full of gratitude. "This," she said, "this is what I've always wanted, to share my art with the world, and to have someone who believes in me, who supports me." Ethan smiled, his eyes filled with pride. "You're amazing, Sophie. I've always known that, even if I didn't show it. I'm so proud of you." Sophie leaned in, brushing her lips gently against his. It was a simple kiss, but it held so much meaning, so much promise for the future. They had come so far, and there was still so much more ahead of them. And for the first time in a long time, Sophie felt like they were on the right path. Together, they could face whatever challenges lay ahead, because they had something stronger than just a contract. They had love, trust, and the promise of a future built together. As they left the gallery, hand in hand, Sophie knew that this was just the beginning of their journey. They had both learned that love wasn't perfect, but it was worth fighting for. And with that thought, Sophie knew that their love story had only just begun. As the year went on, Sophie and Ethan's bond continued to strengthen. They had come a long way from the cold, distant marriage they once shared, and now they were partners in every sense of the word. Sophie had fully embraced her art, and with Ethan's unwavering support, she was able to take her career to new heights. She had even started offering art classes, something she had dreamed about for years but had never had the confidence to pursue. Ethan, too, had changed. He had gone from being a workaholic, focused only on his business empire, to being more present in their life together. He spent more time with Sophie, more time with her art, and more time just being there for her. For the first time, Sophie saw Ethan not as the cold businessman who had once ignored her, but as the loving and dedicated partner she had always hoped for. One evening, as they sat together at the kitchen table, Sophie noticed how much had changed between them. There was no tension in the air, no cold silence, only the warmth of two people who had finally found their way back to each other. "Ethan," she said softly, looking up at him, "do you ever think about how far we've come?" Ethan smiled, his eyes softening as he reached for her hand. "Every day," he replied. "I think about it all the time. I know I made a lot of mistakes in the past, but I'm trying to make up for them. And I'm so grateful that you've allowed me to prove that I can be the man you deserve." Sophie squeezed his hand, her heart swelling with emotion. "I never thought we would get here," she admitted. "I never thought I would be able to trust you again after everything that happened. But you've shown me that love isn't just about the big moments. It's about the little things, the everyday acts of kindness and patience. And I believe in us now, more than ever." Ethan leaned in, brushing his lips gently against hers. "I believe in us too," he whispered. "And I promise you, Sophie, I'll never stop showing you how much I love you." The next day, they took a trip to the countryside, a weekend getaway to celebrate Sophie's latest exhibition, which had been a huge success. It was a peaceful place, far from the hustle and bustle of the city, and for the first time in a long while, they felt like they could truly relax. As they walked hand in hand through the fields, Sophie couldn't help but reflect on how different her life had become. She had once been so afraid to follow her dreams, afraid that she wasn't good enough, that she wasn't worthy of success or happiness. But now, with Ethan by her side, she realized that she could do anything. She could build the life she had always dreamed of, and she could do it with him. Later that evening, as they sat by the fire, Ethan turned to her, his expression serious but filled with love. "Sophie," he said softly, "there's something I want to ask you." Sophie looked at him, her heart suddenly racing. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan took a deep breath, his eyes locking with hers. "I want to spend the rest of my life with you," he said. "I want to build a future together, a future that's full of love, trust, and everything we've worked for." "Will you marry me, Sophie?" Sophie's breath caught in her throat. She had never expected this moment to come, not after everything they had been through. But as she looked into Ethan's eyes, she saw the sincerity and love that had always been there, buried beneath the surface. "Yes," she whispered, her voice full of emotion. "Yes, I will marry you." Ethan's face lit up with joy as he pulled her into a tight embrace, his heart racing with excitement. "I love you, Sophie," he said, his voice full of gratitude. "I love you too," she replied, her heart soaring with happiness. They held each other tightly, knowing that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. They had come so far, and now, together, they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. Their love was no longer a distant dream. It was a reality they were living every day, side by side. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, Sophie realized that she had found something she had never thought possible, a love that was real, a love that was worth fighting for. And with Ethan by her side, she knew that anything was possible. The months following their engagement were filled with excitement and anticipation as Sophie and Ethan began planning their future together. Their love had blossomed in a way neither of them had expected, but now they were fully committed to making it work, building a life together, step by step. The art studio continued to flourish, and Sophie's reputation as an artist grew with each exhibition, each piece she created. Ethan, still working hard in his business, had made it a point to spend more time with Sophie, balancing his demanding career with the new life they were creating. They were finally finding a sense of balance. One afternoon, as they sat on the balcony, sipping wine and watching the sun set over the city, Sophie felt a deep sense of contentment. She had never imagined that life could be so fulfilling, so full of love and possibility. She looked over at Ethan, who was lost in thought, his hand resting on hers. "Ethan," she said softly, "I've been thinking a lot lately. We've come so far, and I feel so lucky to have you in my life. I never thought we'd get here, but now, I can't imagine life without you." Ethan turned to her, his eyes warm with affection. "I feel the same way, Sophie," he replied. "You've changed my life in ways I never thought possible. I used to believe that success was everything, that power and control were what mattered. But now, I know that love, trust, and having someone by your side are what truly matter. And I'm so glad that I have you." Sophie smiled, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. This was the life she had always dreamed of, a life filled with love, laughter, and support. But even as things seemed perfect, there was a nagging feeling in the back of her mind. She had never fully let go of the past, the pain of their earlier years, and she wasn't sure if she could. She had trusted Ethan again, but the fear of being hurt once more still lingered. "Ethan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "sometimes I still feel afraid. I know we've made so much progress, but I can't shake the fear that maybe this is too good to be true. What if something goes wrong? What if we end up back where we started?" Ethan's expression softened as he reached out to gently take her hand. "Sophie, I understand your fears," he said, his voice tender. "But I want you to know that I'm not going anywhere. I'm here with you, for the long haul. I'm not the man I used to be. I'm committed to this, to us, and I know we can handle whatever comes our way because we have each other." Sophie felt tears welling up in her eyes as she looked at him. His words touched her deeply, and for the first time, she truly believed him. She leaned in, resting her forehead against his. "I love you, Ethan," she whispered. "I love you too, Sophie," he replied, his voice thick with emotion, "and nothing will ever change that." As the days passed, Sophie found herself letting go of her doubts and fears, trusting Ethan more and more. They continued to plan their wedding, a small, intimate ceremony, with just close family and friends. It wasn't about the extravagance, it was about the commitment they were making to each other. Sophie knew that their marriage wasn't going to be perfect, but it was going to be real, and that was all that mattered. The night before the wedding, Sophie and Ethan stood together on the balcony once more, looking out at the city below. It was a moment of reflection, a moment to appreciate how far they had come. "Tomorrow is a new chapter," Sophie said, her voice filled with anticipation. "A new beginning for us." Ethan nodded, his arm wrapped around her waist. "It's not just a new chapter," he said softly. "It's the start of a lifetime together." Sophie smiled, her heart swelling with love. "I'm ready," she said, her voice full of confidence. "I'm ready for this new chapter with you, Ethan." The next day, as they stood before their friends and family, exchanging vows and promises, Sophie realized that she had found something she had never thought possible, a love that was real, a love that had stood the test of time and trials. Ethan had kept his word, and together, they had built a love that was stronger than anything they had ever imagined. And as they sealed their vows with a kiss, Sophie knew that this was just the beginning of a beautiful, unforgettable journey together. Months passed since Sophie and Ethan's intimate wedding, and their life together was steadily becoming everything they had dreamed of. The once cold, distant marriage had been replaced by a love that was deeper, richer, and stronger than either of them could have imagined. Sophie had embraced her role as an artist and businesswoman, with the art studio flourishing, and her confidence growing with every piece she created. Ethan, too, had found a new rhythm, balancing his responsibilities as a businessman with his commitment to Sophie and their life together. They were building something real, something solid, something that went beyond the surface-level successes of their past lives. Despite the joy they found in each other, Sophie couldn't help but feel a quiet unease from time to time. They had come so far, and yet, there were still whispers of doubt in the back of her mind. Would they be able to sustain this happiness? Would the challenges they faced, the ghosts of their past, catch up to them again? Ethan could sense her worries, even when she tried to hide them. He knew the scars of their earlier years ran deep for Sophie, and though they had worked hard to heal, there were moments when those wounds would resurface. One evening, as they sat in their living room, the soft glow of candlelight casting a warm ambiance over the room, Ethan turned to Sophie. "You've been quiet tonight," he observed, his voice gentle. Sophie looked at him, her heart heavy with unspoken thoughts. "I'm just thinking," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thinking about what?" Ethan pressed, his brow furrowing with concern. Sophie hesitated, unsure how to express the uncertainty she felt. I don't know if I can fully let go of everything that happened," she said, her voice faltering. "I want to, I really do, but sometimes it feels like it's still there, just under the surface." Ethan's heart ached as he heard the pain in her voice. He reached for her hand, holding it gently in his. "Sophie, I know we can't erase the past," he said softly, "but I want you to know that I'm here. I'm not going anywhere, and I'll be here to help you carry that burden every step of the way." Sophie looked into his eyes, searching for the man she had fallen in love with all those years ago, the man who had become her strength when she was at her lowest. In that moment, she realized that he was still that man. He was the man who had fought for their love, the man who had never given up on them, even when she had. "I trust you, Ethan," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I know you'll never let me down." Ethan smiled, his eyes filled with tenderness and gratitude. "You don't have to carry it alone anymore, Sophie. We'll face everything together, always." And for the first time in what felt like forever, Sophie believed him. As they sat there in the quiet of the evening, hand in hand, Sophie knew that their journey wasn't just about healing the past, it was about building a future together, a future filled with love, trust, and hope. They had both worked hard to get to this point, and they had fought for their love every step of the way. But now, it was time to let go of the fear and embrace the future they were creating together. The next morning, Sophie woke up to the warmth of the sun streaming through the windows, and as she looked over at Ethan, still peacefully asleep beside her, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. She knew there would still be challenges ahead, moments of doubt and difficult conversations. But she also knew that they could handle whatever came their way, because they had each other, and that was enough. As the weeks turned into months, Sophie and Ethan continued to grow together. They faced obstacles with resilience and love, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. They traveled together, explored new adventures, and built the life they had always dreamed of. Sophie never could have imagined that the man who once ignored her, the man who had been so distant, would become the person she trusted most in the world. But here they were, building a future, side by side. And in those quiet moments, when Sophie looked at Ethan, she realized that love wasn't just about the grand gestures or the promises made. It was about the small, everyday moments that held the most meaning. The laughter they shared, the support they gave each other, the quiet nights spent just being together. This was their love story. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was all that mattered. Sophie smiled to herself as she thought about the future. They had built something special together, and she knew that no matter what challenges came their way, they would face them as a team. With Ethan by her side, she was ready to take on anything. She had finally found the peace she had been searching for all these years, a peace that came from knowing she was loved, truly and deeply, by the man she had once thought she had lost forever. As the years passed, Sophie and Ethan's love continued to grow, stronger and more enduring than ever before. They had built a life together, one that was grounded in trust, understanding, and a deep mutual respect for each other. They had faced their fair share of challenges, but through it all, they had remained steadfast in their commitment to one another. Sophie had found not only the success she had longed for in her art career, but also the peace and fulfillment she had once thought impossible. With Ethan by her side, she had built a life that was full of love, laughter, and shared dreams. Ethan, too, had transformed. The once cold, distant businessman had become a devoted husband, a true partner. He had learned the importance of love, of putting someone else's needs above his own, and of cherishing the moments that truly mattered. He had always been driven by success, but with Sophie, he had learned to slow down and savor the simple pleasures of life. Together, they had created a home filled with warmth and joy, a place where they both felt safe, loved, and valued. Their love had come full circle, from the emptiness they had once felt to the deep connection they shared now. As they sat together on the balcony one evening, watching the sun set over the city, Sophie looked over at Ethan, her heart full of gratitude. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice full of emotion. "I never thought we would get here, but I'm so glad we did." Ethan turned to her, his eyes warm and filled with love. "I'm glad too, Sophie," he replied, his voice steady. "I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, but loving you has been the best decision I've ever made." Sophie smiled, her heart swelling with happiness. She had once feared that love was something she could never have, something too far out of reach. But now, with Ethan by her side, she realized that love wasn't about perfection, it was about two people choosing each other, every day, no matter what. "You've shown me what love really is," Sophie said softly, "and I'm so grateful for that." Ethan took her hand in his touch gentle and reassuring. "And you've shown me how to love in a way that's real, Sophie. You've opened my eyes to what truly matters. I'll never take you for granted again." As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, their bond only deepened. They continued to support each other in every way, encouraging one another to chase their dreams and be the best versions of themselves. Sophie's art flourished, and Ethan's business continued to thrive. But the true success in their lives was the love they had for one another. They had found something far more valuable than wealth or fame. They had found each other. One night, as they lay in bed together, their fingers intertwined, Sophie looked over at Ethan, her eyes full of affection. "Do you ever wonder what the future holds for us?" she asked, her voice soft. Ethan smiled, his gaze steady and filled with confidence. "I don't know what the future holds, Sophie," he replied. "But I know that as long as we're together, I'm ready for anything." Sophie smiled, a sense of peace settling over her. "Me too," she whispered. "I'm ready for anything, as long as we're together." And with that, they drifted off to sleep, the sound of their steady breaths filling the room as they dreamed of the future they would continue to build together. It had been a long journey, one filled with trials and tribulations, but Sophie and Ethan had found their way back to each other, stronger than ever before. Their love was not without its challenges, but it was real, it was enduring, and it was worth every moment. They had learned that love wasn't about avoiding the difficult times, but about facing them together, hand in hand. And as they looked ahead to the future, they knew that their story was far from over. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where they would continue to grow, to love, and to cherish each other for the rest of their lives.